The morning sun cast long shadows across Marcus Wilson's garden as he carefully tended to his tomato plants. At 82 years old, his hands weren't as steady as they used to be, but decades of diplomatic service had taught him that patience yielded the best results, whether dealing with alien species or stubborn vegetables. His small cottage sat on the outskirts of New Haven Colony, one of humanity's furthest settlements from Earth. The colony had grown significantly in the 15 years since his retirement, but it still maintained the peaceful atmosphere that had drawn him here in the first place. Marcus straightened up slowly, his back protesting the movement, when he noticed something unusual in the sky. Multiple dark shapes were descending through the clouds, far too large to be the regular supply ships. His old diplomatic instincts kicked in immediately. These were warships. The emergency sirens began wailing across the colony moments later. Marcus hurried inside as quickly as his aged legs would allow, grabbing the emergency communicator he'd kept from his service days. It crackled to life with an automated message. Attention citizens of New Haven Colony. This is Imperial Commander Thex of the Galactic Empire. Your settlement is now under Imperial authority. You have 3 hours to evacuate. Resistance will not be tolerated. Marcus felt his heart sink. He'd heard rumors about the Empire's expansion, but hadn't expected them to reach New Haven so quickly. 3 hours wasn't nearly enough time for a proper evacuation, especially with the colony's large population of retirees and young families. He quickly changed into his old diplomatic uniform, its medals and insignias still gleaming. Perhaps his experience could help negotiate better terms. The colony's main square was already filling with panicked residents when he arrived. Imperial troops in sleek armor were pushing people toward the spaceport, their energy weapons held ready. Marcus spotted Mrs. Thompson struggling with her 3 young children and several bags. Another elderly couple, the Andersons, could barely walk fast enough to satisfy the troops. "Please," Marcus called out to the nearest Imperial officer, his diplomatic training evident in his measured tone. "I am Marcus Wilson, former Earth Diplomatic Corps. Many of our citizens need more time to evacuate safely. Surely we can discuss a more reasonable time frame." The officer turned to him, face hidden behind a reflective helmet. "Imperial orders are not negotiable, human." Marcus stood straighter, his voice carrying across the square. The Galactic Empire prides itself on being a civilized force in the galaxy. Surely civilized beings can show basic compassion to children and the elderly. A hush fell over the crowd. Several Imperial troops turned toward him. The officer stepped closer, weapon raised. "Your primitive species clearly doesn't understand its place. Perhaps a demonstration is required." "Wait," Marcus said, raising his hands. "I'm simply requesting a peaceful dialogue." The officer's weapon discharged with a sharp crack. Marcus felt a burning sensation in his chest as he fell backward. Through dimming vision, he saw other troops opening fire on civilians who rushed to help him. His hand found his communicator, fingers automatically pressing the emergency broadcast sequence he'd memorized decades ago. "This is Marcus Wilson, Earth Diplomatic Service," he whispered into the device. "New Haven Colony. Under attack. Empire forces firing on civilians. Robert. I'm sorry, son. I love." The officer fired again, and Marcus Wilson's long service to humanity ended in the garden world he'd chosen for his retirement. His communicator, designed to survive even the harshest conditions, continued transmitting for several minutes after his death, broadcasting the sounds of Imperial troops conducting their peacekeeping operation. Hours later, as New Haven's survivors were herded onto transport ships, no one noticed the small diplomatic communicator being automatically collected by a maintenance drone and loaded onto an emergency beacon pod. The pod launched silently into space, carrying its message toward Earth. The Empire had encountered many species in its expansion. Some fought back, some surrendered, but all eventually submitted to Imperial rule. The death of one elderly human on a remote colony world hardly seemed worth noting in their reports. They had no way of knowing they had just started a war. General Robert Stone sat in his garden, much like his father had done just days ago. The morning air was crisp, but he barely noticed it. In his hands, he held the small diplomatic communicator that had carried his father's last words across the stars. The message had arrived during a quiet dinner with his wife. He'd listened to it 14 times now. Each time, the sound of Imperial weapons firing made his hands tighten into fists. His personal computer chimed with another message from Earth Command. They'd been trying to reach him since the news broke. This time, he answered. General Stone. Admiral Thompson's weathered face appeared on the screen. I'm sorry about Marcus. He was a good man. He was the best of us, Stone replied quietly. The Empire killed him for asking for more time to evacuate children. Thompson nodded gravely. We've received reports from other colonies. The Empire's expansion is aggressive, but this was different. They made an example of New Haven. Stone stood up, his tall frame casting a shadow across the garden. Once they'd called him the Ghost, the general who could make entire armies disappear without a trace. He'd retired 3 years ago to spend more time with his family, with his father. I'm coming back, Stone said simply. I hoped you would. Thompson's image flickered. The Security Council has already approved your reinstatement. Full operational authority, whatever resources you need. I'll need my old team. Already done. Colonel Peters has the Black Ravens on standby. Your command ship, the Nemesis, is being recommissioned as we speak. Stone looked at his garden one last time. The roses he planted with his father would bloom soon. The Empire thinks we're primitive, weak. They believe their technology makes them invincible. And what do you think, Ghost? A cold smile crossed Stone's face. I think they've never faced humans before. 6 hours later, Stone stood on the bridge of the Nemesis. The massive stealth vessel had been his home during the border wars. Its black hull absorbed light and sensor scans alike, making it virtually invisible to standard detection methods. Colonel Peters, his longtime second-in-command, stood beside him. Her gray hair was cut short in its usual military style. The Ravens are ready, sir. All the old crowd came back, even old Jack with his bad knee. The Empire's report classified the New Haven incident as a minor peacekeeping action. Stone said, bringing up the intelligence data. They didn't even bother recording my father's name. They're arrogant, Peters noted. Their ships are bigger, their weapons more advanced. They've never lost a war. Neither have I. Stone pulled up the star map, highlighting Imperial patrol routes. They rely too heavily on their AI networks, their shields, their protocols. They'd forgotten how to think creatively. The bridge crew worked silently, preparing the ship for its first mission. Many had served with Stone before. They knew what he was capable of when pushed. Sir, Peters said softly, the Empire has over 10,000 warships in this sector alone. We have less than 100 ships that could match their technology. Stone's eyes never left the star map. We don't need to match them. We need to break them. Not their ships, their spirit, their belief in their own invincibility. He zoomed in on a particular point in space. The Imperial commander who ordered the attack on New Haven is currently inspecting their forward bases. His flagship travels with minimal escort because they don't expect resistance. A single target. Peters raised an eyebrow. That's not your usual style. This isn't a usual war. Stone's voice was quiet but carried across the bridge. The Empire believes they can kill innocent humans without consequences. They believe we'll submit like all the others. He straightened his uniform, the same style his father had worn in his diplomatic days. It's time to show them how wrong they are. The Nemesis's engines hummed to life, its black hull disappearing against the darkness of space. The Ghost was hunting again, and the Empire would soon learn why that name had once made hardened soldiers wake in cold sweat. They had killed his father. Now they would learn about consequences. The Imperial command post floated in space like a jewel, its crystalline structures gleaming under the light of 3 suns. Commander Dax stood at his viewing window, admiring how the station's energy shields created rainbow patterns against the stars. His promotion ceremony would begin in an hour, a reward for his efficient handling of the New Haven colony. "Sir," a junior officer approached with a datapad. "We've detected an anomaly in Sector 7. Probably space debris," Dax said dismissively. "The shields will handle it." "Yes, sir, but—" The officer hesitated. "It disappeared from our scans as soon as we detected it." Dax turned, annoyed. "Our sensors are the most advanced in the galaxy. Nothing can hide from them for long." At that moment, every light on the station went dark. Aboard the Nemesis, Stone watched through the tactical display as his plan unfolded. The Imperial station hung before them, now visible only by starlight. His ship had slipped through their sensor net using technology the Empire had dismissed as impossible, human stealth systems that worked by bending light and energy around the hull. "Phase 1 complete," Colonel Peters reported. "Their power grid is down. Backup systems are isolated." Stone nodded. "Time for Phase 2. Deploy the Ravens." Black shapes detached from the Nemesis's hull, small craft piloted by Stone's elite commandos. They moved without lights or engine trails, invisible to both eyes and sensors. "Sir," a technician called out, "Imperial distress calls are being blocked as planned. They're completely cut off." Stone allowed himself a small smile. The Empire relied too heavily on their advanced technology. They never considered that simpler methods might work better. His teams had studied Imperial communications for weeks, learning to disrupt them using basic signal interference. "All Ravens in position," Peters announced. "Ready for breach." Stone pressed a button on his command chair. "Execute." Commander Dax was trying to restore order when the first explosion rocked the station. Not an explosion, he realized. A breach. Something had cut through their hull like paper. "Impossible," he shouted. "Our shields are designed to stop energy weapons and high-velocity impacts," a voice said from the darkness. "Not molecular cutting beams." Dax spun around. A figure stood in the shadows, a human in black combat armor. More figures emerged from other corners of the command center, weapons raised. "Who dares?" Dax began. "My name is General Stone," the figure said calmly. "You killed my father 3 weeks ago. He was the old man who asked you for more time to evacuate children." Dax's eyes widened. "The diplomat. That was just a routine peacekeeping. Those children you forced onto transport ships. 4 of them died from exposure. 2 more from panic in the crowd your troops created." Stone stepped forward. "My father spent his life working for peace. His last act was trying to protect the innocent." Around the command center, Stone's raiders systematically disabled Imperial equipment. Not with weapons, but with simple electronic disruptors that turned the Empire's complex systems into useless metal. "The Empire will hunt you down for this," Dax sputtered. "We have thousands of ships." "Good." Stone's voice was cold. "I want them to try. I want them to know that every time they harm an innocent human, we will find them. Your mighty Empire is about to learn what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." The raiders finished their work and melted back into the shadows. Stone remained, facing the Imperial commander. "Your death would be quick," Stone said quietly, "like my father's was. But that's not the message I want to send." He pressed a button on his wrist. Throughout the station, displays came to life, showing footage from New Haven. The Empire's crimes, broadcast on their own screens. "Live with your shame," Stone said. "Tell your leaders what happened here. Tell them that humanity is coming." When Imperial rescue ships finally arrived hours later, they found the command post intact but humbled. Every system was disabled, every database wiped. Only one message remained, playing on a loop. "This is just the beginning." The Imperial war room buzzed with nervous energy as Admiral Vale watched his fleet disappear from the tactical display. Again, Third Fleet this week vanished without a trace. No distress calls, no debris fields, just gone. Report, he barked at his staff. Unknown, sir, a junior officer replied, voice shaking. Fleet was following standard patrol route when they became ghosts, someone whispered. Vale slammed his fist on the table. A month had passed since the human general's attack on Commander Dax's station. Since then, Imperial forces had suffered a series of inexplicable defeats. Ships vanished. Supply lines broke. Communication networks failed. Deploy the 4th Battle Group, Vale ordered. I want every ship equipped with our new sensor arrays. Nothing could possibly hide from. The display flickered, cutting him off. A message appeared, looking for us. Aboard the Nemesis, Stone watched multiple screens showing feeds from across Imperial space. His strategy was working. The Empire's mighty fleets were scattered, chasing shadows while his forces struck their real targets. Sir, Peters approached with a data tablet. Raiders just hit another supply depot. 30 ships worth of fuel and ammunition, gone. The Empire's southern fleet is now operating at 40% capacity. Stone nodded. And the psychological warfare? Better than expected. Peters smiled grimly. That last trick, making their ship's engines glow human skull red before they vanished, has their crews terrified. 3 Imperial captains refused deployment this morning. The Empire had responded to their losses by sending massive battle fleets to crush the human resistance, but they didn't understand what they were fighting. Stone's forces never engaged directly. They struck from shadows, vanished into sensor-dead zones, and used the Empire's own rigid protocols against them. New intelligence from Fleet 2, an officer called out. The Empire's trying to adapt. They're removing AI systems from their command ships. Too late, Stone murmured. His teams had already infected those systems weeks ago. Every time the Empire activated their advanced computers, they gave Stone's forces another way in. A console beeped. Sir, Imperial 4th Battle Group is moving to Sector 7. Largest fleet they've deployed yet. Right where we want them. Stone stood, examining the tactical display. Launch Operation Pitfall. Admiral Vale watched with satisfaction as his massive fleet moved into position. 500 ships, the pride of the Empire. Their new sensors swept space for any sign of human vessels. Let them try their tricks now, he said to his bridge crew. No force could possibly. Sir, a sensor operator shouted. Multiple anomalies. They're everywhere. The space around his fleet shimmered. Hundreds of ships seemed to appear from nowhere. Human vessels, their black hulls barely visible against space. Impossible. Vale breathed. Our sensors showed nothing. That's because we weren't hiding, a calm voice said over his command channel. We were waiting. The human ships didn't open fire. They didn't have to. Vale watched in horror as his fleet's own targeting systems turned against them, locks engaging on friendly ships. What did you do? He demanded. We learned, General Stone's voice replied. While you were hunting us, we studied every frequency your ships use, every protocol, every override code. Your entire fleet is now under our control. You can't. Your engines will now take you home, Stone continued. Remember this day. Remember that humanity could have destroyed this fleet, but chose not to. Unlike you, we don't kill unnecessarily. Vale could only watch as his ships turned as one, their engines glowing skull-red in the darkness. The Empire's greatest battle fleet, defeated without a single shot fired. The message was clear. Humanity wasn't just fighting back. They were winning. The Imperial High Command Chamber had never been this quiet. 5 of the Empire's most powerful leaders sat around a black table, watching their mighty realm crumble on the displays before them. High Commander Rex broke the silence. 3 major shipyards destroyed in the past week. 200 ships vanished. 50 colonies in revolt. All because of one human. Not just one human, Admiral Vale corrected, his voice hollow. His forces are everywhere now. Other species are joining him. The Centauri gave him their stealth technology. The Arcturus shared their shield frequencies. A red alert flashed across the screens. Another Imperial base had gone dark. "We should have never underestimated them," General Thorne said, his aged face lined with worry. "Their technology seemed primitive, but they think differently than us. They adapt. They improvise. Then we must adapt too." Rex slammed his fist on the table. "Deploy the new super dreadnought. Use the planet killer weapons. Show them our true power." The chamber's main door slid open. A junior officer rushed in, face pale. "Sirs, the super dreadnought. It's gone." "What do you mean gone?" Rex demanded. "It vanished during its test flight, but before it did, its computers transmitted this." The officer's trembling hands activated a hologram. General Stone's face appeared above the table. "Good evening, gentlemen." Stone's image said calmly, "I believe you're missing a ship. Don't worry, we're putting it to better use. Your automated construction facilities are quite impressive. They build exactly what their computers tell them to build." Rex's face turned purple. He infected the shipyard computers, made them build the dreadnought to his specifications. "As for your planet killer weapons," Stone continued, "I suggest checking their status carefully." General Thorne quickly accessed his command console. His eyes widened. "The weapons, they're gone. All of them. The storage facilities are empty. We didn't steal them." Stone's message continued. "We disabled them. Unlike you, we don't believe in weapons that target civilians. This war will be won through precision, not mass destruction." Vale leaned forward. How is he always one step ahead? "Because you still don't understand what you started," Stone's image answered, as if hearing him. "When you killed my father and those civilians on New Haven, you showed us what you really are. An empire built on fear, unable to comprehend strength born from compassion." The displays around the chamber began showing footage from across Imperial space. Ships displaying surrender signals. Colonies declaring independence. Ancient subject species rising up against their oppressors. "Your own people are turning against you," Stone said. "Not because we defeated your fleets, but because we showed them a better way. Every time we spared an Imperial crew. Every time we helped evacuate civilians from our battle zones, we proved that power doesn't require cruelty." Rex reached for his emergency beacon, but found it dead. Like everything else, the humans had already thought of it. "You have two choices," Stone concluded. "Surrender to the new Galactic Council we're forming, or watch your empire tear itself apart. You have 6 hours to decide." The hologram vanished, leaving the Imperial leaders staring at each other in the dim chamber. "6 hours," Vale whispered. "After 3 centuries of absolute rule, he's giving us 6 hours. Can we fight back?" Rex asked, his voice having lost its usual power. "Do we have anything left?" General Thorne stood slowly, looking at the displays of their crumbling empire. "We have our pride, old friend. But pride won't fuel our ships or feed our people. The human general has done what no other force could. He's broken not just our military, but our very way of thinking." "And to think," Vale said quietly, "it all started because we killed one old man." The Nemesis hung in space above the Imperial capital world, its black hull reflecting the light of a dying empire. On the bridge, General Stone watched as his final plan unfolded across 100 tactical displays. "Sir," Colonel Peters reported, "all strike teams are in position, waiting for your signal." Stone nodded slowly. "Begin Operation Daybreak." Across Imperial space, thousands of human ships dropped their stealth fields at exactly the same moment. They appeared over every major Imperial installation, every fleet headquarters, every government center. Multiple Imperial commanders requesting to surrender. A communications officer called out. "Accept all surrenders," Stone ordered. "Remember, no unnecessary casualties." Peters studied her display. Sir, 90% of Imperial forces are standing down. Their chain of command it's just dissolving. Stone allowed himself a small smile. The Empire had never understood that their greatest weakness was their rigid hierarchy. Take out the top, and the rest would crumble. Imperial High Command is requesting an audience, Peter said, surprise in her voice. They're offering total surrender. No, Stone replied quietly. Not yet. The bridge crew turned to look at him. Stone stood, his father's old diplomatic pin gleaming on his uniform. Sir, Peters questioned. I want the ones responsible for New Haven. Specifically, the officers who gave the orders, who pulled the triggers. Stone's voice was calm but firm. The Empire's surrender means nothing if those who murder civilians face no consequences. A new alert flashed across the screens. Deep in the Imperial capital, hidden bunkers were opening. Last resort weapons platforms warming up. They're going to fight, Peters warned. No, Stone said. They're going to learn. He pressed a button on his command chair. Throughout Imperial space, every computer screen, every hologram projector, every communication device activated at once. The footage played everywhere. Peaceful New Haven colony, Imperial troops firing on civilians, an old man dying while trying to protect children. Marcus Wilson's last moments, broadcast across an empire. This is why we fought. Stone's voice transmitted alongside the footage. Not for territory. Not for power. We fought because you needed to understand that every life has value. That strength without compassion is just another form of weakness. In the Imperial capital, the weapon platforms went quiet. Their crews, watching the footage, lowered their hands from the controls. Your empire was built on fear, Stone continued. Fear of difference. Fear of change. Fear of those you saw as beneath you. But look around. See how many of your own people chose to stand with us. They saw a better way. Peters checked her displays. Sir, Imperial High Command. They're coming out. Surrendering personally. Stone watched as the mighty rulers of the Empire emerged from their bunkers, hands raised. But he wasn't done. To those who gave the orders at New Haven, who pulled the triggers, who watched civilians die, and felt nothing, you have 1 hour. Surrender to face justice, or your names, faces, and actions will be broadcast to every world in the galaxy. You won't be able to hide, not from your own people, not from anyone. He turned to Peters. Prepare a shuttle. I want to accept their surrender in person. Is it really over? She asked quietly. Stone looked at the tactical display, at the thousands of Imperial ships powered down, at the colonies declaring independence, at the new alliances forming between former enemies. The war is over, he said. Now comes the hard part, building something better. As if to emphasize his words, the Imperial capital's defense systems powered down one by one. The mightiest empire in history had been defeated not by superior weapons, but by humanity's most powerful tools. Adaptability, determination, and the strength that comes from protecting others. The Imperial throne room felt smaller than Stone had imagined. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the dust particles floating in the air. The mighty throne itself stood empty, its golden surface dulled by time. They're ready, Peters said from behind him. Stone nodded. Bring them in. The massive doors opened, and Imperial guards led in 5 figures in chains. Commander Dax, looking much older than he had on New Haven. The officers who had given the orders. The soldiers who had pulled the triggers. Do you know who I am? Stone asked quietly. The human general, Dax replied, his voice hoarse. The ghost. No. Stone touched the diplomatic pin on his uniform. I'm the son of the man you murdered. The man who asked you for mercy, who tried to protect children, who spent his life working for peace. He walked to a window, looking out over the Imperial capital. Do you know why my father chose to be a diplomat? None of the prisoners spoke. He believed that every species, every civilization had something to teach us, something to offer. Stone turned back to them. Even now, even after what you did, I think he was right. A hologram appeared in the center of the room, showing Marcus Wilson in his diplomatic days. He was younger, speaking at a peace conference. The true measure of a civilization, Marcus's voice echoed through the throne room, is not its technological advancement or military might. It's how it treats those who cannot defend themselves. Stone watched the prisoners' faces as they recognized the man they had killed. You thought humanity was primitive because our ships were smaller, our weapons less advanced. But true strength isn't about technology. It's about what you stand for. The doors opened again. Representatives from a dozen species entered, former subjects of the Empire, now free allies. Your trial will be public, Stone continued, not for revenge, but for justice. Every world in the galaxy will hear my father's last words, see his last actions. They'll know he died trying to protect the innocent. Dax looked up, finally meeting Stone's eyes. We were wrong, he whispered, about everything. Yes, Stone replied simply. You were. He gestured, and the guards led the prisoners away. Peters approached with a data tablet. The new Galactic Council is assembling, she reported. They want you to lead it. Stone shook his head. No, my part in this is done. The council should be led by those who understand diplomacy, not warfare. I have somewhere else to be. 3 days later, Stone knelt in his father's garden on New Haven. The colony was rebuilding, its people returning home. The roses his father had planted were blooming. We did it, Dad, he said softly, touching the earth. The Empire's gone. There's a new council forming, species working together instead of conquering each other, just like you always wanted. He placed his father's diplomatic pin in the soil beneath the roses. Around him, the sounds of reconstruction filled the air. Children played in the streets again, their laughter a victory sweeter than any military triumph. Peters found him there at sunset. The last Imperial holdouts have surrendered, she reported. It's really over. Stone stood, brushing dirt from his knees. No, he said, smiling slightly. It's just beginning. My father used to say that ending a war was easy compared to building lasting peace. He looked up at the stars, visible now in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, the new Galactic Council was meeting, species that had once been enemies now working together. His father's dream, finally becoming reality. What will you do now? Peters asked. Stone touched one of the roses gently. I think I'll plant a garden, he said, and maybe teach others what my father taught me, that true strength comes not from the ability to take life, but from the courage to protect it. High above, the stars twinkled like distant memories of war, slowly fading into a new dawn of peace.